everyone. I welcome every one of us to today's class. So yeah, we'll be creating Next.js app inside our starter directory within our week 12 folder. So once this is done, I'm going to push all this to GitHub so you have access to the source code as well. So npx create next app at latest. I can hit enter, or I can optionally just give it a name here. Let's say student. If you don't put a project name here and you hit enter, then it will give you a command to enter the project name. So whichever way you want to do it. So I can just hit enter here, and then it's going to ask me for the project name. So we can say students record, right? This is the project you're working on, but I'm going to start the first part of the project. So this is to help you have the basic understanding of how CRUD works, and then you can continue building the other part of the project. So this is the name of the project, students record, right? Or students records, or anything, doesn't matter. So would you like to use TypeScript? We're not using TypeScript, so we can leave it as no. Would you like to use ESLint? Yes. Would you like to use Tailwind CSS? No, because we didn't do that. Source directory? No. App router recommended? Yes. Would you like to use Turbo Pack? Let's do no. Let's do no. So if you don't have any error, permission errors or anything, this should go smoothly and have, yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. So sometimes you could have this on Windows. You may not see this, but once this happens, it's talking about permission error. So you can see in line, it's trying to create this error access. It's trying to create a path within my machine, but my machine is not granting it access. So once you have this, I need to elevate my access as the user here. So you may run into this sometimes. So on Mac, you can do sudo. So I'm elevating my access level on Mac. I can now do, in fact, let me just do this. The last command I ran is npx, right? So I can do sudo in front. So once you do sudo in front, it will now ask you for your password. Sudo, not sued. Sudo, not sued. So take note. So it's going to ask me for my password. I've entered the password. You won't see any prompt. So I've entered the password. Now it's asking for project name again. Let's see. Now, if it's possible, it has created that folder. Yeah, so it has created a part of the in fact, the folder and some parts of the project. So we have to create. Let's remove that folder entirely first. Let me do Ctrl+C. Clear. So I'm inside starter. I can do RM option RF star. So so I have just one folder inside my starter folder, right? So I can do star. Star means all the content in that folder. So since I have just one folder inside the starter folder, I can just do alt to remove everything. Or if you want to selectively delete the content of a folder, then you can now put in, instead of putting star, you can put the name of the folder. So I want to recursively and force the delete of that folder. So option R and F, I'm force deleting, and I'm doing it recursively, meaning that the delete command is going to go into subfolders as well, and then delete all the content of the file. So I'm doing this because I want to rerun that npx command again, elevating my access level using sudo. Because if you don't do that and you want to retain the same name for the folder, it's not going to work. So you're asking me if I'm sure, if I want to delete this, I'm going to say yes. I want to delete the only file in, yes, so I can do yes. So if you look at this, if you observe this part of the screen, you can see nothing is here. So the folder has been deleted. So I can rerun my npx command now using sudo and then give it a project a name, students record. Students record. No, yes, no, no, yes, no, no. So let's hopefully this works. So let's just give it some minutes for it to run. So the command is running. You can see that loading animation at the bottom left corner. So success. So yeah, that is done. All right, so my access elevator, but let me see, let me check ls minus -la. Let me see who the owner of this. So yeah, I've also noticed that, can you see my screen? I can see root, this root as the owner of this student's record because I used sudo to install. So I've observed that because it's a different user and then you want to perform, so there are times that where you want to perform some action, this root is the default, is the admin root for my Mac, for this Mac machine, right? But my user that is currently logged in is this Cletus here. So if you try to run some commands inside this folder, it may give you access issues again, and you don't want to keep on doing sudo every time, when you want to run your commands, right? So you can actually change the ownership of that folder. So I'm just going to run a command to change the ownership of the folder. So these are the likely errors you could run into especially when you are on Mac and you are creating projects like this. So sudo change owner option R. This is the command. So I'm going to paste it here. Paste. So look at that command, sudo choun. That is change. I want to change owner option R. Then $user. That $user is the current user, which is Cletus this time around on this machine. Then the project directory you want to modify. So this time around I want to modify this student's record. So once I do this, now my prompt is back. Now if we do ls minus -la again, you can see, look at this line here. Formerly it was root, right? It was root here, but because we've changed ownership, it's now Cletus at this point. So with this, I have full access to working inside, to be able to work inside that folder. So cd, I can go into my project directory, cd student records, and then clear. So I have access there. So this is the project structure like we did last week. You have your app router or the app directory. You have your node modules. You have your public directory, which contains your static files like images. So when you're working on your project and you want to serve static files like images, right? You put them in the public directory. These are SVG files, which are images. What else again? You have your JS config file, and then you have your package.json. So package.json, like we said last week, contains your what is it? It's a file. It's a file that describes the package. So inside this file, you can see dependencies. You can see dev dependencies, and especially you can also see scripts, right? So these are the scripts that enable you to run your project. For example, if you want to run this project in development mode, right? What we don't need to do is npm run npm run dev. So npm run is the command, but what script are we running? This dev. So, but what is the value of this dev is what is next dev, right? So if we want to build the app, we'll do npm run build, which has a value of what next build. That means Next.js wants to build this app ready for production, ready for for you to deploy, out there for users to use. So meaning that that app is no longer in development mode. They have all the development features of the app will be stripped away. For example, error reporting. When you are developing as a developer, it's good to see errors and things like that, so that you're able to fix those bugs. But you don't want those errors to translate to a live project that your users are already using. It can reveal sensitive data to your users. You don't know who is using your app and all that. So yeah, then the start script is to run the production version of your project. So if you do next start, it's going to run the built version of your project. If you do next dev, it's going to run the development version of your project. And of course, links is to check JavaScript to make sure JavaScript is compliant, checking, making sure JavaScript is type safe and what have you. So now we have our project, the default Next.js project setup. So let's just run npm run dev. So let's see the output. Now, one good thing about Next.js is that you can see local. Local gives me the localhost address where I can go to view the result of my code, but also gives you a network URL as well. So meaning that if you are developing your code, you can go to this URL within the same network, and you will view the result of your code of your code. So, for example, you have your mobile phone that is linked to your network. You have other laptops that is linked to your network. You can go to this link and it's going to display the results to you. Remember, your code is running locally on one machine, right? But now that link exposes it to all clients connected in the same network. So which is very good. It's very handy. There are times that you are working, you want to view the mobile version of your code of your project. You want to view how responsive your code is on a tab, on a mobile phone, on a bigger screen, right? You don't have to go and be running your script in all those devices. With this network URL, just go to your phone, load that URL. You're going to see your website loading for you, as if you are browsing, as if you are online browsing, but it's running within your own local network in your house, right? So because if you do this, if another person tries to join this link that is not within my network, they can't get it. They can't get in. So the network is local to me right now. So if you run this on your laptop, you're going to see something like this as well for yourself. So I can click on any one of these and it's going to pop. It's going to launch the website. So open. I command clicked. So on Windows, you need to control click. So it has opened in my other window. So let me drag it to this place so you can see. So deprecation warning. You can ignore those deprecation. So let me bring the window here so you can see the result, the output. All right, so that is the default Next.js app that is installed. You can see the port that this is currently running on is 3001. So yours may be 3000, right? You may be asking, why is mine 3001 and yours is 3000? The default one is 3000, but if that port is currently busy, I think I have another Next.js app running on port 3000. So any Next.js app you try to run again on that same machine, we pick the next available port, right? So that's that. So during development, these are the things you just go through. But of course, once you deploy your app to production to your server, you don't need to worry about all this. So now this is the default website that we have here. So how did we get here? So let's go to our source code. You can see under the app directory, under the app directory, you can see the folder structure there. So this page.js is what gave us this output. So this page.js directly under the app directory is what gave us this output. So it is the home page. Remember last week we talked about how pages are displayed, or how pages are created in Next.js. Before Next.js 13, and generally in web development, you have a default page, like a home page, that is usually named index.js or index.html or index.ts for TypeScript, right? And most web servers already understand those defaults as well, although you can change them. So for Next.js, any page you want to route to, any route you want to create, any user interface you want your users to have access to, must reside in a file named page.js, ts, or tsx, or jsx, right? So that's how it works. And then we also talked about the concept of module-based styling, or CSS, and global styling. So for each page file you want to style, you can separate. So we're having, just to introduce separation of concerns, right? Sometimes you don't want to put all your CSS in one big globals.css file. You want to be able to just quickly go to one file and say, oh, I want to change or work on CSS pertaining to settings page, or CSS pertaining to my login page, or CSS pertaining to only the blog page, right? So Next.js gives you modules for you to organize your CSS. It's just a way of organizing your CSS, right? So that's that. So this page.module.css is the CSS that applies to this page.js, right? That's that. Then there is a layer.js as well. That is the root layout of your app. So it's like the top level layout within which all other pages are displayed. If you scroll down, you see children here. You can see this is like the HTML that we're used to, HTML body and all that. But within the body, you now display your page, the content of your page. So every page is like a child of the root layout. So take note of that. So you have that as layout.js, which comes with every installation of Next.js app. In fact, if you delete this, Next.js will automatically recreate it, because it needs it to as the root layout of your application. So what we want to do in today's class is to see how to create forms and then being able to submit forms to database. And one database we're going to be using is PostgresDB. So you can install PostgresDB locally on your machine, or you can make use of cloud versions, serverless versions of or managed versions of Postgres. So let's Google PostgresDB. So many database applications out there, but Postgres is also very popular, and it's open source, meaning it is free. You can download it and use it. But of course, if you are using it in a managed environment, you may not need to pay for that environment to host your Postgres database. But downloading it, installing it on your local machine, it is free. You have access to it and all that. Now, the environment we'll be using to set up Postgres on the cloud is Neon. You must have heard of Neon. So neon.tech. Neon.tech. Let me log out so that it gives you. So this is Neon. Let's go home. So it says ship faster with Postgres. So the database you love on a serverless platform designed to help you build reliable and scalable applications faster. So serverless here means that I'm sure most of us have heard of AWS and Azure, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. So these platforms have popularized cloud computing. So these are just different aspects of cloud computing, as popularized by the big players. But we have small players too. So Neon is one of those. Vercel, where you host your Next.js app. We talked about Vercel last week. Vercel. So these are platforms where you can host your applications, right? And so I was talking about serverless. So these platforms are serverless. They're on the cloud. You only pay for you only pay for what you use or the compute resource, right? You know, we had in those days when you would host your website on a dedicated or on a shared server, right? Which is still popular. Platforms like GoDaddy, EasyHost, those other hosting platforms where you host your website, you can share your server with other people, and that's why it is cheap, right? Although not as cheap as, well, depending on the volume of transaction, not as cheap as serverless or cloud platforms. So serverless means that it is managed. You don't need to bother yourself about managing vulnerabilities, managing extensions, managing, in those days when we used to deploy PHP application on Linode. Is it Linode now? Some of those platforms, we needed to go into the backend, the Linux backend, to install this, install that, manage deprecated extensions, make sure everything is well formatted. We install SSL and all that. But serverless technology has now taken all that off our shoulders, right? Like AWS, just deploy your app on AWS. The experts are there to help you manage everything, all the compute resources. In fact, if you need more space, maybe you are beginning to have large volume of transaction, automatically it can scale up what you've initially reserved to use, the resources you've initially reserved. So this is what cloud computing offers, right? So it can automatically scale your services just to meet up with the demand and all that. So Neon is very good for hosting Postgres database. So now, if you've not signed in, you can sign in, or you can sign up and then create an account. So, but I've already signed in, so I'm just going to log in with my. So once you've created an account and you sign in, you're going to land on the console. on your console, right? So so here you can see different projects you've created, or if you've not created any, you can create a new project. For example, I can come here and do new project, right? So what is the project name? So since we're developing something around students, right? Student record, I can say student record, student records, right? Postgres version. So what version of Postgres database are we using? Let's leave it at 16. Then cloud service provider. So like I said, we have the big players and the small players. So most of these small players still rely on the big players like AWS, Microsoft Azure, and GCP. So yeah, let's just use the default AWS. Region is select the region closest to you. There's something called edge computing in cloud computing. You want to serve your users, you want to serve the content of your website closest to where it is hosted. So if you know you are in Africa, for example, and because there could be delay and lags when people are trying to load your website, right? So, but if your website is hosted closer to your users, it loads faster for them. So we can see Frankfurt in Germany, we can see Sydney in Australia, Singapore in Asia, we can see Oregon and Ohio in the US, North Virginia in the US, and all that. So choose the one that is closest to you. I'm going to leave this as US East Ohio. Then we have choose compute size. So what is the compute size? For example, so the free version that we're using now is going to give us 1 gig RAM. So what we are doing here is we are reserving space on the cloud, on a server somewhere for us to host our database, right? So, and every server is just like a normal computer. So it has its own RAM, CPU speed, and everything. So if you need more resources, that's when you now start paying for all those resources, right? So like in this case, 0.25 virtual CPU, 1 gig RAM, max is going to be two virtual CPU and 8 gig RAM for this free version, right? So we can just leave the default as it is and do create project. So once you've created the project, it's going to take you to a dashboard. This is the dashboard, and it's going to automatically link the quick start. So here you can learn about how to set up for different environments for Postgres. So you'll be needing your connection string. So that's the beauty about cloud platforms. It just gives you a connection string, and that connection string helps you to make connection to the database. So you put your connection string somewhere, make sure it's not exposed. So you don't want people to have access to your connection string. So yeah, make sure it is not exposed. Put it in a place where when you push your source code to GitHub, it doesn't get pushed, right? And that is a file named .env. So if you go to our folder structure again, so by default there is no .env here. So what you do is that you create a .env. That env means environment, right? So, and if you check the git ignore file, you see somewhere, let me see, yeah, .env star, meaning that any file that starts with the star means any, all. So any file that starts with .env, whatever the name may be, or the other part may be, will be ignored. So this is git ignore file. When you are pushing your source code to GitHub, Git ignores all these files. For example, you don't want to push node modules. There is no point pushing node modules, because if somebody clones your code and does npm install, that process will install those dependencies on their machine. So you don't want to push your own dependencies, right? So you can see all the node modules will be ignored. Any file here is going to be ignored. When you can see the build folder too is ignored, the out folder is ignored, right? So all the logs folders are ignored and all that. So you create a, let's do that here right now. So you create a file named, we can do .env.local, signifying that it is the local or development version, right? So .env.local or just .env, right? So whichever one. So here you put all your credentials. If you have API credentials, you have connection strings that you don't want to expose to people, you don't want to put out there in the public. You put all these values here, all those values here. So back to this point, it says, so I can copy this. So let's just copy snippet, and then you give it a name. In fact, if you go to, so you give it a name here. Let's do database underscore URL. So by convention, anything you put is just a convention, right? Anything you put in your .env file, the variable names for .env file are usually in uppercase format. So database underscore URL equals, put in quotation marks, and then paste your connection string. Now let's examine this connection string. It has, let me paste something here so we can look at it together. So it has different parts, right? Let me paste it. Okay, let me just do it here. So look at this. Let me take this. Let me remove this here. So look at, this is the format of your connection string. You can see PostgreSQL, that is the name of the database. PostgreSQL : / user, right? In this case, this is the user here, NeonDB owner, / password, right? Your password. In this case, all this is the password for my, where is it? Password at, so before the at sign, okay, here. Yeah, before this, you can see password at endpoint host name. So before this at sign, you can see / something. So this is the password to our Postgres database at endpoint host name. So after the at sign, from here down to where is it? Down to neon, down to .neon. Yeah, this one. So that's our endpoint host name. And then there is a port somewhere, then / database name. You can see DB name. SSL mode equals required. So that's just the format of, so in case you are trying to get your password, the password of your connection string, that is how to get it. But most times you don't even need to extract the password. The connection string is all you need to make reference to your database. So that's that. Now, so we have our connection string in our env.local. So how do we set up our project now? So let's move on to setting up our project. So let's remove, I really do not need this. Let's remove module. We're doing something simple. So in your own case, you may want to leave it, but I can just delete this. Global.css. Let's remove everything here. Let's check our page. I can remove everything here. I can just do, remember, every Next.js page or component is what? It's a JavaScript function. So it's a JavaScript function. So I can just do React functional component let's leave it as page, right? Was it page or home or whatever it is? So I can do home page. So let's view. Is that what we're still having in the front end? We might be having, okay. So you can see, so we've cleared the default boilerplate code that came with Next.js because we want to write our own. So this is the landing page for us, home page. So what we want to do is to create a form for registering students' records, right? So you are working in an environment where you need to, where you are the developer to take to create or managing a platform for students' data and all that. So that's basic HTML and CSS. So we don't want to do all that. So what I would just do is, I'm just going to bring in the HTML and then the CSS. Let me do, because we don't want to start typing HTML and CSS again at this stage. So let's focus on Next.js, so that now this is the, so most likely we're going to be having some bugs, but let's see how to resolve those bugs. So it says create is not defined. So let's see somewhere. Look at line 9. So it's telling us at line 9 in this HTML form element, there is a function we are trying to reference, but that function is not available. So let's just take out that part for now. Go to line 9 in our function. Where is it? Line 9. So let's take out this. In fact, let's remove all this. So we're going to come back to this. So let's make sure we have a form that is our UI is working. So it's loading. Now get data is not defined as well. So let me take that off for now. So take this off. So we're having just the, so now this is simple, right? This is what we've done before. Just simple HTML, your labels and your form input and all that. So this is perfect. This is good, right? Now let's just apply the styles. Let's quickly apply the styles, and then we'll talk through the differences between pure HTML and then Next.js, or how Next.js interprets those parts of HTML that we're used to. But there are minor changes which I'll explain very soon. So let's bring in our styles. Now it is unstyled. It's really not looking beautiful. But let's see how to, let me remove this. Let me remove this last one here. So let's bring in our styles. So not to waste our time again, all the styles are available. I'm just going to bring it in. All the styles are available as global styles. So I'm gonna use global. This is something we are used to. So inside our global that is blank here, I'm going to paste my CSS. So now let's go back to our page. Whoa, can you see the effect of styling your page, styling your form? So this is what CSS does. So CSS is to style, to beautify your page. What we had before was just the structure. There are labels, there are form inputs. That's all. That's what HTML gives to you. But CSS, look at, from which we've done all this before. We are resetting CSS here. We are making sure there is no underline. All our tags doesn't have any decoration. We are setting font family. The container has a width of 500, which is this container here. Which you look at the form. Look at the top level. This is the container. See, has a width of 500. Increase it to 1000. See what happens. You can see this is now 1000. This is the width. This is the width of 1000 pixel, right? So these are basic CSS that we are familiar with. H1 is also styled, and so on and so forth. Now let's now examine the difference between pure HTML and JSX. You know, in HTML, we use class in HTML, right? Class, not, there's nothing like class name to load your classes in HTML. But in Java, in JSX, remember this is now JSX, right? In JSX tries to differentiate attributes and properties from HTML. So anywhere you have your class as a pure HTML attribute becomes class name in JSX. Take note of that. See, so that's why sometimes you may need to copy a pure HTML markup into your React or Next.js app. You start seeing, the compiler flagging those errors. For example, if I just make this class, which is normal HTML class attribute, right? So sometimes the compiler could flag that particular, you can see 2 errors. Let's view the error. The first one here is our hydration error that we are used to, that we talked about last week. But if you scroll to the next one, it says invalid DOM property. Remember DOM? Class. Invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? You can see. So the JSX compiler, Babel in this case, is trying to point your attention to something that, okay, I know what you're trying to do. You are trying to load CSS from an external file from wherever. But I am JSX. I don't understand class. I only understand the name, class name. So please change it to class name. So let's go back to our source code again. So in case you copy, so I'm doing all this to, again, let us know how JavaScript frameworks interpret your normal HTML tags and syntaxes, and again, to let you know that when you copy just HTML markups into your Next.js or a React-based framework, you may need to go through the source code and then correct them and change them to what JSX expects. So anywhere you see class, that means that will be what class name in JSX. Similarly, look at this one, HTML4. In HTML, there is an attribute called just for, F-O-R. That means this label first name, is for this field with ID first name. And this is the field. And what is the ID? First name. So when this page loads on the browser and you click on this label, automatically this field is gains focus. So that is the effect of using labels on your markup, right? But again, we are inside JSX world at this point. This is not pure HTML. So JSX has an equivalent attribute or property for that. It is now the HTML4. So take note of that. So if you check documentations, you will see all the corresponding attributes that you can use. So I just wanted to point that out to us. So take note of that. All right. So we have our form. So register student record. So this is just a simple form. First name, last name. If I click on submit now, let's see. See, there is a required property applied to this, telling me please fill out this form. These are just normal HTML properties. Last name, let's say James. Last name Adeoye. Date. If I click submit again, please fill out this field. So just normal. This is not even Java. These are just basic HTML checks. HTML5. So HTML5 introduced these basic checks for your on your markup, so you don't even need to use JavaScript for this. So this is a date field. You can see this is a date selector. You can select your date from here. Select this. If I click again, so it's jumping address because address is not a required field. Look, let's go back to our form. So look at these are the individual form elements. So we have first name, last name. You can see, so this is the required flag that pops up that that helps you check whether that field is required or not. So but for address, you see is omitted somewhere. Where is it? Address. Yeah, so for address doesn't have required, so that is why it's not checking for address, or not checking the address text box for content. So it's jumping straight to level, right? So that's that level. I can say the student is in 200 level or whatever. State is, let's say, or your state, and then let's select where is the student from. The student is from Canada, right? So we can then submit. So now let's check. So let's go back to now our form. Of course, it goes nowhere because we've not linked our form to our database. So how do we do that? So now we have our form ready, and already we've set up our neon, our Postgres database that is hosted in the cloud, and we have access to the what is it, to the connection string. So what do we do? So how do we perform CRUD operations? So how do we even create, how do we insert records into that database? So that's what we want to talk about now. So the first thing you need to do is to, let me import. So there's something called server actions. Let's see, server actions, Next.js. So with server actions, data fetching, server actions and mutations. So it says server actions are asynchronous functions that are executed on the server. So there are different ways of performing CRUD operations in Next.js. So the latest versions of Next.js have introduced, other features, right? So and one of them is server actions and mutating your content and all that. So it says they can be called in server and client components to handle form submissions and data mutations in Next.js applications. Remember our server and client components? Remember when we did use client last week? So that's anywhere you see use client, it shows that particular component is a client component. And then there's also use server as well, which shows that particular component is a server component. So it says this is a convention. A server action can be defined with the React use server directive. So you can place the directive at the top of any asynchronous function to mark the function as a server action. So take note of that. Then in forms, server actions can be invoked using the action attribute in a form element. This is very important for us. So because we are dealing with forms in this case, we can call server actions directly from within our form attribute. Remember the form attribute in HTML? The form attribute in HTML tells your server to submit a form, to post a form somewhere, or to execute, the result of maybe a back-end API code or something. So that's the action attribute of a form. When you submit a form, what action do you want to perform or what do you want to do with with the behavior of submitting that form. So for example, I may want to submit the form to a database, which is what we want to do today. So the action attribute helps you to specify where you want to submit that form, and then the backend now handles all the business logic. So in React, in our React app or our Next.js app, we can do the same thing here. So we can say, we can create, let's create the, let's create the, what is it? The function. So let's create the function for inserting records into our table, right? So we're going to start this way, then gradually we'll upgrade this script to using best practices. But let's start this way. So we're going to create a function export. Remember the export keyword, async function, asynchronous. Anytime you want to perform an action that may delay the response of an endpoint, right? So you use async await. So that means you want to do this asynchronously. While something is happening, by the side, another action should take place. Don't block the event loop. Don't block the main thread of your application. I want my application to still be responsive, even though things are happening, behind the scene. So you don't want to block the default or the main thread of your application. So you use async await. So async function, we're creating a function. Let's call it create. Let's just name it create because we want to create a record, right? So export async function create. So inside this function, let me check. We're using Neon, right? So we need to install in this project. I don't think we've done that. Where is my package.js? Package.js. Dependencies. Yeah. So we need to be able to use Neon. Remember, we are using Postgres that is managed by Neon in the cloud. So for us to have access to Neon functions or Neon methods or properties that can help us to do that, you need to install the Neon package as well. So I'm going to run that now. Neon. Yep. So npm install Neon database serverless. So all these things are available. Let me close this. Let me Control C. So paste. So all this. Now where did I get this? All these things is in the npm registry. So you can just Google them. So I don't want us to waste our time. If you check npm registry, if you do npm Neon database, in fact something like this. So you are going to see, if you go to npm registry, you can see this is what I copied from here. Npm install. I is the shortcut for install. You can type it in full or you can just do I. Npm install Neon database serverless. So this helps you to work with Neon cloud platform. So let's come back here. So npm install Neon database serverless. Click this, enter. So it's going to install. Now check our dependencies. Look at your package.json. You can see it has placed the Neon database driver inside our dependencies section within our package.json. So that's why when you push this to GitHub, all these dependencies will be there. So if somebody copies your code or clones your code, all they just need to do is to do npm install. It's going to install all the dependencies that the project needs alongside all other node packages that the framework needs, right? So take note of that. So with Neon installed, we can go back into our package, our home page. So export async function create. So we're doing create. So we can now import Neon because we want to make use of Neon, and we've installed Neon already. So we want to bring it into our page. So we'll do import Neon. You can see import Neon from where? Neon database serverless, which is what we have installed. If you want to check what it is, it's already part of, if you check your node package, node modules, you see it somewhere here. So these are all the dependencies that both the Next.js, the node environment is using to run your project. Yeah, so look at it. So at Neon database, you can even view the source code. Everything is here, right? So these are packages that others have written to help you work on your own project. So we've imported Neon. Now what we want to do is to use that Neon to make connection to our database. Remember, we have our connection string in our environment variable. So we can do const SQL. We want to make connection to our SQL, our Postgres server or database. Then Neon. So we can make use of Neon because it has been imported. So process. So this is how you fetch data from your environment variable. So you start with the process property that comes with node. Process dot env, then dot the name of the variable you want to fetch, you want to use. So let's check again. Let's go back to our env file. So the name is what? This is the name, database URL. This one. This is the name. And it is equal to this. So this is it's like a key value pair. This is the key, then this is the value. Everything here is the value. So we need just the key to make for us to have access to that particular that particular variable. Variable. So export async function create. So let's create our schema. Already I have that written somewhere. So I'm just going to copy this and look, we'll explain, we'll just talk through it. Look at this. So this is just a simple assignment operation. This is in database or in RDBMS generally. That is relational database management system. There are different types of database management systems. So some are relational, some are non-relational, like NoSQL databases like MongoDB, CouchDB, Cassandra, and all that. So, but Postgres is a relational database which creates tables and creates tables and fields. For example, you can see this statement: create table, if not exists, student. So what we have here is not JavaScript. For those who are new to coding, this is not JavaScript. This is not Next.js. This is SQL query. It's called SQL query or SQL query that helps you to query a relational database. So you can create table, you can select from table, you can update table, you can delete tables or records in a table, you can update records in a table, things like that. So it is special query language called SQL that works with relational database, like Microsoft SQL Server. You must have heard of Oracle. You must have heard of MySQL. It's another one, very popular and an open source one. MySQL. Postgres is just another one. So they all have their similar flavors of query syntax, right? So for Postgres, this is how you create a table. So what we're trying to do is that Remember, I want to create a database for our students, right? So we are saying that if that database does not already exist, go ahead and create it. But if it already exists, skip this action of creating a table. That's the meaning of if not exists. So this if not exists clause is just for it helps you to check whether that database exists or not, or else it may overwrite the content of an existing database, right? You want to be careful. If you are sure that the database doesn't exist and it's going to be a one-time operation, you can just do create table students and then define the fields of that table. But if you're not sure, you can check if the database does not already exist, then go ahead and create. But if not, please don't recreate. So in this case, these are the fields in our database. The first field is an ID. Serial. That serial there means that it's going to be an auto increment value, right? Or a serial number, right? So whatever value is just normal serial number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and so on and so forth. Then the next field is first name. So all these are the data types of the field. So this primary key means that it is the key or the field that uniquely identifies that table. So meaning that no two students should have the same ID. So you can tag ID as your primary key, right? First name is a variable character of length 50. It should not be null, meaning that when you are submitting that form, a value must be entered for first name. So that's why we made provision for checking required in the front end. Remember the front end checks required, and so on and so forth. So that when you are submitting this form, you are making sure that that field is required from the front end, and then it is being inserted into a non-null field inside our database, right? So take note of that. Then, so these are all the other fields. We have last name, variable character. There are different types of data types. There are character, variable character. There are text data type. There is a date data type. For example, date of birth is a date data type. Address is a text data type, meaning that you can input just random text. A whole blog post can be stored in that text field, right? Level, I made it a variable character. State, a variable character. And country, a variable character as well. So with this schema ready, we can now await the execution of this schema, right? Or build the schema. So we can now do await SQL. Remember, SQL is available to us here. SQL is from here, right? Because this one gives us a connection. It's like a connection to the database. So SQL is an established connection for us to use. So I can now pass in my schema or the database structure here. Right? Hope we are getting the gist. So now, so what's the next thing? We now need to await the execution. So let's execute the create statement. We want to insert records into the database, right? And how do we do that? You call your await again, await SQL. So this takes two parameters. Number one is the query you want to insert, right? The query you want to run, and then the values you are passing to that query. So these are the two parameters that will be supplying to this, right? So inside this query, what are we doing? We're inserting into, remember, this one is creating the table, while the next one is we are inserting into the table. So this creates a table. Once it is done, you can see I wait. It's going to wait. It's going to be running asynchronously rather. And then this one will be running asynchronously. So it will not block the event loop, right? And then the next one is now to insert into that particular table or existing database that have been created, in the previous lines. So the query is insert. Let's insert. So what is the query? Insert. This is query language again. We are now in SQL query world. So this is SQL query. So insert into. Where are we inserting into? Students. This is the table name, students. Can you see? Students. So insert into students, right? Now, what are the fields of the students we want to insert? Or what fields are we working with? So you can do selective insert, or at this point we can just select all the fields since we want to insert all the records. We need first name, we need last name, we need date of birth, all of them. We need address. We need level. I'm conscious of the time. We need level. We need state. And we need country, right? Space, comma. So that's the first parameter. So we want to execute an insert function or an insert query. So you need the insert query itself and the data or the values you want to insert into the database. So how do we get these values now? Remember when we work with forms in JavaScript, there is a way your DOM, how your DOM makes, remember your get element by ID or get, things like that. So let's come back to the form. So when you use actions, server actions in Next.js, server actions automatically exposes your JavaScript form data to you. So, and you use the name attributes of your form data to fetch those records. First name, last name, DOB for date of birth, address, level. These name attributes, these values from this name attribute is what your JavaScript form data uses to fetch the values of the of your form, of your user interface elements, state, and then country, right? For country. So Next.js, once you use server actions, I'm repeating that again, Next.js automatically gives you access to your JavaScript form data. So, meaning that if I do, so since we now have this function here, I can do in your form, go to your form, action. Remember the action attribute of HTML is the same action attribute. But because we are in Next.js, we can supply an async function to this action attribute, and it's going to give us access to all the JavaScript form data, the form data of that particular page. So with this done, I can put a variable called form data. At this point, automatically JavaScript Next.js initializes that as the form data of that particular form that is coming from the front end. So meaning all your labels, the date you are selecting, all the text form, text field rather, will be available to you from this form data object by just doing this, by doing action equals create, right? Remember that. But then this create function is not yet a server function. Remember, in the documentation, it says you have to use a particular directive. Where is it again? Let's go here. See, use server. It says a server action can be defined within the React use server directive. You can place the directive at the top of any async function. So you must follow the documentation. There must be an async function, and then you must place the use server directive at the top of that async function. So let's go back to our function. So this function, the first condition is an async function, and then in fact, we don't even need to export this. We are here, so we're not importing it from anywhere. So at the top of this function, this is the body of the function from line 6 to line 28. From here, you can collapse this. See, from line 6 to line 28 houses the body of this async function. But this is just an ordinary async function. It is not yet a server action that Next.js recognizes. So for us to make it a server action, we must now do use server at the top of the function. So this means that this create function is now a server action, and supplying it to any form with the action attribute automatically exposes the content of that form. So I can start retrieving the content of this form using my first name, last name, DOB, address, level, state, and so on and so forth. Right? So that's what we want to do now. So inside, so it is what we are retrieving from the form that we are now supplying as values to our database. So that means we can do at this point, I can now do what's the first attribute? Form data dot get. So like I said, Next.js exposes form data to you using server action. So you don't even need to do create an object of form data. It is already a form data object by default. So I can now use the get property to do form data.get. What are we getting? The name attribute of that particular form. Name attribute. So the first one is first name in quotes, and so on and so forth. But I'm just going to copy what I'm having here. Remember, I must put them in an array. It has to be in an array, so take note. So this is going to give us this. So after getting all the form fields, this is what you're having in an array, because there are more than one. You put them in an array, and then that becomes the second parameter to this SQL values. But again, there should be placeholder. So let me see how many items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you place your 7, insert into students. This query is not complete. Values. What are the values? Then you open and put in your placeholder. In those that are coming from Java world, you can remember things like prepared statements and all that. So you put your placeholders for those particular values. So the first one is number 1 in that particular order. So I have $1. That's the placeholder for first name, and that's the first value. $2, placeholder for the second value. $3, $4, $5, $6, and $7. I think I have 7 of them. So 1 first name, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now, so this is the insert query. This is a complete insert query. Insert into where? Students. What values? Values. You can directly hard code content here, but we're not hard coding content. We want to fetch these values from the front end. So we need placeholders for them. So these placeholders will represent what is coming from the front end. This is what is coming from the front end. Your JavaScript form data. So form data.get, first name, last name, DOB, and so on and so forth. So that's why you need the placeholders here. Right? So with this done, so what else can we do? We can now, let's see if we can insert into our database. We already have, so create is here, first name, last name, date of birth. Just making sure I don't have bugs in my code. So let's run our code again, npm run dev. Npm run dev. I can go to localhost. So 3000, enter. So now we have this. So let's try to insert into our database. The first action is that, remember, it's going to try to create the table if it does not already exist, right? So, and let's go and check. We can even go and check our Neon console. Let's see. So once you get your Neon console, this is your dashboard, but you can also scroll down to tables. Remember, we're inside the student's record database. If we refresh this, so nothing is here. Assuming this is where all your tables are listed. So at this point, nothing is here. But let's try to create a student and see if the first table will be created for us. So first name, James Badmos, date of birth, let's see, was born December 19, address, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, street name, level, James is in 400 level, state, James is from Kaduna, and then let's select James's country. He's from United Kingdom. So let's submit and see what happens. Ooh. Did you notice that the contents have been cleared? So let's go and check our database. So let's check our database. Let's go to our Neon console. Refresh. Remember, we're inside student records already. That's the name of the project we created, which automatically equals the database name. But inside database, there are now different tables. Let's check. Let's refresh this and see. Whoa, did you see that? Students. Can you see the records in the database? ID 1. I will talk about this again. Then first name, James. Last name, Badmos. Date of birth, the same thing. Address, level 400, state, country, United Kingdom. So congratulations, you've completed your first CRUD, or a part of your CRUD project. You've been able to insert into a database hosted in the cloud, a Postgres database managed in the cloud. So you don't even need to set up all this locally on your machine. Everything is running on the cloud. So let's come back to this. Let's insert another record again. Let's see what happens to this ID. And remember that we're not inserting. Look at the insert statement here. Insert into students. First name, there is no ID. But remember when we created the table, The schema has ID, first name, last name, date of birth, address, level, and so on. But when inserting the record, we're only inserting into this. So it is because ID will automatically be created for us. That's why it's a serial value. So at the point of entry, you don't even need to, or at the point of insert, you don't need to specify the ID that you are inserting, right? Except you have a user defined ID. For example, maybe in your school, the school you are working for, they have their own ID format for their students, right? So you must create a field for that. Let's say matric number. Let's call it matric number for those from Nigeria. Matric number of type varchar. Let's do type 30. Most matric numbers are not that long, and then it should be not null. Every student should have a matric number, right? So if the policy or if the organization you are working with has a user defined ID, in this case like a matric number, then you need to insert that matric number. It depends on the project, right? The matric number could be auto-generated at the point of creation. You may want to assign matric numbers to people because you don't really, insert matric numbers. So the way it works is maybe the university generates matric numbers for all students, and then you are the developer. They give you a record of all matric numbers. You just load them into the database before updating records and all that. So yeah, so I just wanted to stress this, that the ID that is a serial ID doesn't have to come here at the point of entry, at the point of insert. You don't have to do that here. So just insert all the other fields that you need, and then you'll be able to you have your record. So let me take away this. I'm not inserting matric number. So let's insert another record again. State California. Let's do and then country. Anyways, look at, so I was supposed to refresh the table from here at this point, right? So we have two rows now. So you can see I wanted to say show you how auto increment or the serial data type works. So even without inserting a value for ID for Jennifer, automatically that serial keyword will auto increment this particular field in the database. So you can see Jennifer is not second in the database or in the table. First name, last name is Prado, and so on and so forth. So that's how the insert. So we said we're dealing with CRUD, right? Create, read, update, and delete, right? Create, which is we've done that part now. Reading is when you want to now fetch records. So when you want to view the results of a database, if your manager comes to you and says, okay, the vice chancellor or somebody needs the records of all the students in 200 level chemical engineering, right? So you can see the beauty of database. You can modify your table to include other fields. For example, in this case now, we don't have the department, we only have level, we don't have the department, we don't have the school or faculty, we don't have, so you can modify your database to include all those data points that a typical student should have. So once you have that ready, you can now query, can do a select to query the content of that database and have it displayed maybe in a different window or something. So yeah, that is just a simple demo of how Next.js help you create your, or can help you do insert into a database. Like in this case, uh, we're making use of Postgres. There should be a feedback to the user after submitting the form. Let there be like an alert somewhere telling me, oh, the form has been submitted, right? If there is an error along the way, tell your user that, oh, something went wrong, or there's an error somewhere, so that you can have feedback. You can give your users feedback, for them to have an idea of what is going on behind the scene. An ordinary user will be surprised by the fact that the data just disappeared and this page is still here, right? So a real world application should now maybe load a different page, take you back to the admin home page, or let you know that the form has been submitted, or a success page, form submitted successfully page, that can kind of let the user know that something has taken place, right? So of course we know this is working, but you want to make sure that your users are carried along when they're interacting with your application. I'm going to push this code to GitHub, so you have access to the UI, the user interface, the CSS, the HTML. Everything is already made available for you. What you just need to do is be able to update a student, right? Be able to fetch a student and then resubmitting that change back to the database. Remember when we worked on that library application, we're doing everything on local storage, but now this is not more like a real life application. We are not using local storage to store data, and we are not manipulating DOM anymore. That is the beauty of React and Next.js. So we are not manipulating DOM, we are not doing anything. Go ahead, be able to update, fetch your record, and be able to update the record or delete your record. So that is the project that I'm going to be working on in this week. You have 1 week to do that. Again, this is just the foundation. The documentation are online. In case you are stuck at any point, go to Next.js.org. Come here. Next.js.org. And then you see everything you need. Your actions, your server. Just come to documentation here. So you have access to everything: the installation, project structure, building your application, routing, data fetching, right? So you may want to route, after submitting a form. Once it is success, that means once the code is 200, your HTTP code is 200, they can reroute to a different page, right? So all those things are here on the documentation. Where is it? On documentation. So that's your routing. So data fetching, everything we did today is on. You see everything here: data fetching, and also styling. How to style your CSS is here. So using server actions, we looked at this today, and other parts of data fetching. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been an awesome 3 months or 12 weeks. Wow, that's actually 3 months. It's been an awesome 3 months working together on this project, on this bootcamp. I really enjoyed myself, and I'm sure you did also. Please don't forget to submit your, what is it now? Give us your feedback. Give us your feedback concerning the project, so that we can plan better next year. Next year, by God's grace, we are planning to introduce other features, other tutorials, other courses, right? So that people can really learn and be able to build projects. And also, I was going through the feedback. Some people wanted more time, to be able to work together. Instead of meeting every Saturday, some people wanted like twice a week or 3 times a week, to be able to work. So hopefully next year we'll be able to plan better, and then and work together a lot more. So thank you very much, guys. So please go ahead and work on your project. The announcement will be made, like I said, on our Discord community. You will know whether you qualified for the gift. All right, take care, guys. Good night, everyone.